and welcome to the newest episode of Reclaiming My Mind. I'm your host, Jessica Vaughn, also the president of the Democratic Progressive Caucus. And today we actually have a Pasco candidate as our guest. We have school board candidate in District 3, countywide, Meghan Hamer. How are you, Megan? Welcome to our show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. We don't really get to do a lot of the other counties, especially Pasco. So I'm excited to have you on and kind of talk about what's going on in that county, because even though I'm so close to it, I'm almost in Pasco County, I feel so disconnected from it. So before we jump into all that, let's start with a little bit about yourself. Tell me about your background, and then maybe tell me a little bit about why you wanted to enter the race.
Cool. Like Jessica said, I'm Meghan Hamer, and I am a former foster mother. I've had 30 kids or more. I lost track at some point. And I remember how difficult it could be to get some of my students into the system, into the school system, specifically students with IEPs. Some days we were able to go in day one, get the student registered, and by day two, we were starting the IEP services.
So I hate to interrupt you, but first,
individual education plans.
Okay. Are those typically plans to support students who might have a disability, whether it's physical or learning disability?
Yes, they're typically my kiddos had some sort of learning disability. I had a few with gifted, but because of their transition through the foster care system and going school to school, getting services set up wasn't necessarily the easiest thing for them. Some days it was easier than others. Some schools were like, let's do this. We're ready to go.
Right.
And other schools were like, oh, we'll get to it. And their 30-day window passed and their 45-day window passed. And I'm knocking on principals' doors going, hey, what's up? That was not in Pasco County, but I have heard from parents in Pasco County that, you get close to the 30-day mark and the school's scrambling to figure out what to do so that they make sure they're staying within the confines of the law and making sure they get services to our students. I started running after an incident where a friend's child was being bullied on the playground. The daughter came, we were doing a Mother's Day photo shoot last May of 2017. And she got upset in the middle of it, and we were like, what's up? And she said, these girls wouldn't let me use the playground equipment. We're like, what do you mean? And they're like, she said that they said, we don't need any more Mexicans on our playground equipment. Well, if you know this young lady's mother, that does not fly. And her mother went to the school on Monday and said, what's up? And the principal spoke to the students and reported back to the mother and said, oh, it's not a big deal. They were just playing president. Yeah.
Wow.
So I was not pleased. Her mother was not pleased. People were contacted. A group up in Pasco County, Citizens Against Discrimination and Social Injustice, were contacted. They didn't receive responses from the current District 3 school board member.
Wow.
That's not cool. I'm not okay with that. And so I ran.
So what do you do for a living? What's your background?
I currently work at St. Vincent de Paul Thrift Store in Clearwater.
Oh.
Which is pretty cool some days. Another days it's really hot. So I enjoy my job. I'm able to assist in getting, last year we gave out 598 changes of clothing, and this year, 96 families received a household of furniture.
So that sounds like it overlaps with being a foster parent. So it doesn't even look like you're old enough to be a foster parent. So what made you decide to want to be a foster parent?
I just love kids. I have a bachelor's in Christian life and ministry, focusing in student and family ministry. I have a master's degree in ministry, focusing again in student ministry, which is kind of that youth group age, the 6th grade through 12th grade. But I love kids of all ages and always have. I've been told many, many times that I have not yet grown up. I love playing and going to Disney and running around and dodgeball and laser tag and go-karting are some of my favorite things to do when I have free time. I don't remember what free time is at this point, but
sure.
I'm looking forward to it come the winter.
So tell me a little bit about your district and your constituency. So it's countywide. How many voters does that consist of?
Last time I checked, we were over 300,000 voters. I want to say we're pushing 310,000 voters. There's approximately 500,000 people that live in Pasco. So I feel like we have a good amount that are registered to vote, given that number. We have about 75,000 students and about 10,000 educators in our Pasco County school system. Educators, including our teachers, our SRPs, our administration. SRPs are school-related personnel. So we've got a good chunk of people. District 3 goes from the Gulf up to U.S. From Pinellas County line up to U.S. Or 54, and then it goes all the way out. And when 54 becomes 56, it continues along 56 and drops at Bruce B. Downs. So it's narrow, it's short and long.
So this is a district-specific race, not countywide?
So the way Pasco's set up, and I don't think it's set up the same in every county,
right,
is you have to live in your district in order to run, but everyone in the county votes for you.
Oh, okay.
So it basically, the way it was explained to me and the way I like to explain it is you don't have 5 people out of Dade City or Wesley Chapel or Land O'Lakes. You don't have 5 people who are like, we can make this the best ever for our students in this school.
Right.
So we're going to run for county school board.
Interesting.
You have people from across the gamut. I personally live in Holiday, and Holiday is one of the less affluent areas of Pasco. It is the welcome way from Pinellas County up US 19, which is convenient for me at my current job. But I like it.
So are you running against an incumbent, or in how many?
I am. I'm running against Cynthia Armstrong, who is the incumbent.
Okay. How many years has she been in office?
She's been in 8.
8 years. Okay.
8 years, yes.
And do you have other candidates who are running against her as well?
Yes. Heidi Janssen. She is a mother who has been very vocal about many issues in the past.
Okay. So there are 3 candidates in the race.
Yes, ma'am.
An incumbent and you and the other one.
Yep.
And what would you say separates you from the other 2 in the race?
I am the youngest. I remember what being in high school and being in middle school was like. I have had many of my kiddos that were in school very recently. Still working with my oldest, who I typically affectionately refer to as my 17-year-old, and she very kindly reminds me that she's now 19. Sometimes not so kindly. But we're still working on getting her graduated, even though I'm not her parent anymore.
Well, I love that commitment. So it sounds like that you're similar to a candidate we just had on who was Kayla, who is a young person.
Kayla.
She's awesome. Running in Polk County. And what was interesting when we were having a conversation was we were kind of discussing the disconnect between the Democratic Party encouraging young people to become involved, but then not necessarily supporting them as candidates and using the youth against them when they want to run for office. Is that something that you found to have a similar experiences being kind of a younger candidate?
Not in my race, because while school board is a nonpartisan race, I'm the only Democrat running for my position. I know there is a Democrat running in seat 1, and there are 2 Democrats running in seat 3 or 5. Sorry, and the young one in seat 5 is getting a little bit of a pushback, but not anything terrible.
So since you mentioned that you are, a Democrat, you'd mentioned that part of your experience was helping to found the Young Democrats in Pasco.
Yes.
So tell me a little bit about that experience.
I noticed in October when I went to the Democratic conference in Orlando that there was Young Dems. I didn't think about that before, And I said, we really need to get something going in Pasco. So I started talking with the leader of the Florida Young Dems, Jake Sanders or Saunders. And he helped guide me with the start. And we started in May, and there was a little bit of trouble, and I stepped back for a little bit, and now I'm the vice president of the Pasco Young Dems, and we're working to get going and get a strong group. There's a lot of young Democrats registered in Pasco, but getting them all into one place is a little harder because everybody's got various schedules. We don't have, as young Democrats, as millennials, we typically don't have that 9 to 5 work schedule. I personally work 7 to 2:30, which is fabulous for me, but not everybody else has that luxury or wants to get up that early.
And I'm sure that, the way that the economy is staggered or structured these days, it seems like a lot of young people kind of piecemeal together a living so that they may have 1 or 2 jobs, driving Uber or something else. So
after the campaign, Uber Eats, I'm paying off those student loans real soon.
So let's kind of jump into some of the issues specifically to school board. Congratulations. I see that you won the endorsement for the State Progressive Caucus.
I did.
So one of my questions, and it was on the actual endorsement form, is tell us how your campaign reflects your progressive values.
I have talked about the issue with bullying, specifically racial. I've discussed many times about how we need to make sure our LGBT students are protected. As a candidate or as a staffer on the Bernie campaign, education and free and fair education for all students is very important to me. I wish we can get college passed. I wish it would go back and grandfather my college in, but that won't happen, and I'm okay with that. I understand that. But I think college or careers to vocational type training need to be available for all students after graduation. It needs to not be the how do I say it? It doesn't have to be the I'm getting out of the neighborhood. I'm going to college. I'm that one student this year from our neighborhood that's going to college. It needs to be available to all of our students.
Right.
Or vocational training. Because I feel like I overemphasize vocational training sometimes because it wasn't for me. Vocational I need a mechanic. It's not me. But we need to make sure that those people who are gifted in that have the ability to be trained in that. Right. And that starts in middle school. That starts with junior achievement in elementary school. Learning what you're gifted at and how you can be an entrepreneur, how you can, learn these different skills that I don't have is so much better than everybody should go to college. I like to say college is not for everyone and everyone is not for college. And having both available is the important part.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like, I don't know if I've heard that similar thing come from Andrew Gillum, who's running for governor, but I know that he has a similar platform in making vocational skill, which he calls jobs with dignity, as available as college, because it's not just one size fits all. So let's ask about, now I know you had mentioned support staff when you were talking about supporting, our teachers before. So this kind of opens us up for the next question I had, which was, what will you do or how will you stand up for teachers and support staff?
Well, currently in Pasco, we are saying that we're unable to provide any sort of raise for our teachers or SRPs this year. We need to find $4.4 million in our budget. I've been carrying the budget around with me since Thursday, and every time I get 10, 15, even 5 minutes, I've been going through the budget. Currently, I have questions. I haven't gotten the whole way through the budget, and I found almost $1 million in other expenses that cost more than half of the instructional cost of the entire for the entire school. So what are these other expenses and why do they all get lumped in when, you know, you have X number of dollars for books that's smaller than this?
Right.
You know, what? So I have those questions, and I'm planning to bring it before the board on August 21st during my 3 minutes of public comment. But we don't have the opportunity, like, there's money. But where's it going? We don't get to see the end of the year sheet. Like, we get the budget, but we don't get the expenses. Like, what did we actually spend out of last year's budget? We're told, but what areas can we trim? We need to look at that. So that's the first thing I want to do to support them. There are many others. I'm very happy that Pasco County Schools is not raising the benefits, the amount that teachers and SRPs have to put into their benefits this year. The district's covering that gap. That's helpful, but a raise would also be very helpful.
Absolutely. So when we're talking about budgets, I know that, you know, in my experience with school board candidates, we have a lot of passionate candidates that talk about education or talk about supporting students or teachers or parents. But I'm not sure if a lot of people who go to vote really understand how much of the job requirement is balancing a budget. And sometimes I think we get passionate, school board candidates in, and then that becomes the second piece. So tell me, it looks like you're already thinking about the budget, and that's a priority when you're talking about it. What experience do you have with budgets or finance, or how do you think that can help with, you know, the job description of balancing the budget?
I don't have a ton of experience with the budget. I don't know that anybody that applies for school board outside of people who have significant financial career history would have an experience with a $1.4 billion budget, billion with a B. I manage my budget, but that's about it. And I don't think that should disqualify anybody. But I think they need to be ready to jump into it. I went through the 2017-2018 budget, and I found some things and I asked questions, and they never got responded to. But that was approximately $800,000 of what the heck are we spending this on? Which, you know, still wouldn't give teachers a raise, a 1% raise, but it's a question. And if I have question on that and I can find 10 other things, we can give them a 2% raise.
Right.
So I don't have experience with the budget, except what I myself have dug through. And you need to be ready to dig in.
Do you think that you'd be able to surround yourself or tap people who have been on the board? Do you think you'd be able to build those relationships to be able to kind of, because what I find is if you're a candidate and maybe you don't have experience for everything, a strength that candidates have is if there's something that they're lacking as far as experience, they have the ability to use the people around them as resources or tap experts or, you know, take an online class or whatever they need to do to become experts in that area. Is that something you'd say that you're committed to as far as the budget is concerned?
Absolutely. I know there are current school board members who, I'm thinking of one in particular that asks a ton of questions, and she goes to the CFO and goes, I don't understand. And you know,
which is the chief financial officer.
Yes, the chief financial officer for the district. Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Miss Swinson is the chief financial officer for our district, and she answers all kinds of questions, both from the dais and from in individual meetings with school board members.
So you feel like if you cultivated a good relationship with this person, you would have the support that you needed.
Yes, absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about the role of public education in our society. As we have guests that come on, one of the issues that I really press candidates about, regardless of whether it's a school board candidate or a state legislative candidate, is their commitment to public education and make sure it's funding, and their stance against this privatization of education through the charter school push. So why don't you tell me a little bit about your thoughts on that?
I want to start with, I'm not a fan of charter schools as they currently are. When they were originally created, they were meant to be a community-based school. They were meant to try new ideas and bring them back to the district so that perhaps the district could try them in our traditional public schools.
Right.
They were meant to be a partnership with the district and a community-based board of directors, a community-based teaching system. What they have become is a front for corporations who have a, quote, nonprofit board, end quote, that is really employees or the board of directors for this for-profit company. They charge the district 25-ish% to manage the charter school. They charge another 15-ish% to rent the building to the charter school. Charter schools get hundreds of thousands of dollars to start. If they decide not to start after their year zero, when they're in their planning phase, we don't get paid back that money. This year, the legislature approved, I want to say, about 3 times the amount of funding, capital funding, for about a third of the amount of charter schools. So charter schools got 3 times more money. There's a third less of them than there are public schools. Public schools got hosed. And I'm sick of the legislature doing that. I'm sick of our representatives. I believe Richard Corcoran, who is retiring, thankfully, in House District 37. His wife, I believe, is the manager of a charter school, quote, corporation, end quote. It's not working.
If you were on the board, what would be your approach to approving charter schools? Because here the application has to come before the school board, and the school board has to approve the charter school application. Is it the same thing in Pasco?
It is.
So what would be your approach to approving charter school applications?
I'm not a fan of it. I don't want to approve any of them, but at the same time, we have to realize that when they are unapproved, they have the option to go to Tallahassee and fight it. And then we're sending lawyers up there. We're paying for all of that. And then Tallahassee has not yet denied an application for a charter school. So fiscally, I'm not sure which one's the more responsible one to do. And I need to research more into that. But my heart says I don't want to approve any of them because they're not doing what the initial intention of charter schools was to do. My other frustration with charter schools is they can turn around on, say, a Friday in the middle of the school year and say, yeah, we're done. Lock up the doors. Right. And we've got to take the kids back, which is not a problem. Every student has a right to be in a public school, but we don't get any of the funding that follows the student.
Yeah, and then it becomes an overburden on the classrooms.
It does.
Already, because you didn't have time to appropriately make sure that there was staffing.
Yeah.
And
I believe Ohio had that happen with a charter school system this past school year, and 4,000 students had to be reabsorbed into public schools in Ohio.
Yes, it's all very frustrating for me. So let's move on and talk about, it sounds like, and this was one of my questions, that you have experience and that a passion for working with students with disabilities is one of the reasons that you wanted to get into the race, is because you had some frustrations with that. So one of the questions I wanted to ask about was what you would do as a board member to increase funding and access for children with disabilities, regardless of whether they're physical or learning disabilities.
I believe one of the main things a school board member should be doing during legislative session is they should be spending a good chunk of that time in Tallahassee. They should be talking to our state legislators that represent Pasco County and those on the education committee and saying, we need money for this. We have the ADA law. We have the American with Disabilities Act. We have students who need this support, and we don't have the funds. You keep giving us unfunded mandates after unfunded mandate, and we need the help because we're not paying for education anymore. We're paying for unfunded mandates to have people in our building with guns. So we need to fight for that funding. I also have family in Pennsylvania, so that is a 2-hour drive from D.C., so I'd be happy to go up to D.C. for a couple of days and say, listen, guys, I'm commuting back and forth because it's cheaper on the district to just pay for my plane ticket and I can borrow a car and come down here every day than to say, we need money for this.
Right.
You know?
So your priority would be getting it funded first
Getting the funding, because we need the funding to pay the extra support staff. We need the funding to train the extra support staff. We need the funding for the curriculum for the child, and any other services they may require.
Right. Yeah, I think curriculum is definitely important as well. So I'm glad you've mentioned that. Tell me what your thoughts on high stakes testing are.
Ugh. Does that say enough? I'm not a fan of high stakes testing. I remember I grew up in Pennsylvania. We had the PSSAs in 3rd grade, 5th grade, 7th grade, 11th, and 11th grade. Because it was great as a senior. You got to come in late. But that was it. You didn't have state testing every year. You had, of course, finals in middle school and high school. I remember in elementary school, we had like 100-word spelling test from all the words we learned over the year. But it was not as stressful. You didn't have students freaking out that they might not be able to move on or graduate. Right. It was just to test. It wasn't to test the student. It was to test to see more of how is the school in general doing. And it wasn't tied to teacher pay raises. It wasn't tied to anything that it seems to be tied to here and now.
Right.
I believe Pennsylvania's changed a little bit. We have a little more testing, but it's still not to the extent. And I'm sorry, Pennsylvania ranks higher than Florida in education. So,
what do you think is the driving force behind these high stakes testing?
I think it's a little bit, it tells people where to move because we put the grade on the schools.
But what do you think we have such high stakes testing? Do you think there's any tie to that and the for-profit testing facilities?
Absolutely. Yeah.
That mandate this high stakes testing?
It tells people where to move. It tells people where, when you have people creating tests every single year, you're giving them jobs, which jobs are good, but when it puts undue stress on students
and teachers
and
parents.
teachers, it doesn't do any good. I think they could find better use of their time and their money, working on SAT questions and ACT and,
which would be,
I don't remember what ACT is.
Another form of...
Yeah, it's another standardized test that I took many, many, many years ago.
Gotcha.
But yeah, it's just, you can find them another job and leave our students alone.
So since we're talking about capital, one of the questions I think is an interesting question is your specific district's biggest capital needs. So what do you think are the greatest needs, capital needs in your district and how they should be addressed?
We need more buildings.
Okay.
We're running out of space for our students. We need a technology center on the east side. We have 2 on the west side.
Wow. Is that a more affluent side?
No, the west side is the US 19 corridor. And I would definitely say it's less affluent than, say, Wesley Chapel or areas like that. Wendell Kren is scheduled to open on August 13th. It's the first year for that. And then is that going to be a technology school? Yeah,
is it a magnet or a charter school?
It's I guess a magnet because it's owned and run by the district. And then we've got Marchman, which has been in operation for a while. But they're about a mile apart they're not even a mile apart from each other. I think they're a block or 2 away from each other. And then you have literally nothing on the east side. You do have, in the schools, there are some programs, like there's a culinary program at one of the high schools, but there's no immersive option.
So you would say you need more buildings.
We need more buildings.
You need more funding for technology and magnet interest.
Yep.
Vocational kind of support for students. Okay.
Definitely.
And speaking of your district specifically, what do you think would be your job as a school board candidate in ensuring equity in your district?
My district is on the far west, southwest portion of my district is probably not the poorest in our entire county, but it's a poorer section. It's where I live. We had a county commissioner 2 years ago, I believe, in an article call my town Fallujah, and she's scared to go there. So we need people who care. We're currently mostly Title I in that area. Rezoning has been a big issue in Pasco County schools, and nobody has gotten rezoned into our high school. And I don't have the numbers on me, but it is well below capacity. I want to say it's in the 80% range when we have schools that are in the 120s.
Wow.
So we can do a little bit better for our students and work on the rezoning appropriately.
Would you say that there's more of a racial inequality or an economic inequality, or they sort of mirror each other?
I would definitely say there's more of an economic disparity in our county. In your county. My district, there's some economic because I go all the way. I have chunks of Wesley Chapel. I have chunks of Trinity that are new and up and coming in $250,000 places. And I've got my town where I could go out and buy a trailer for $45,000 with no HOA. So,
is there a lot of racial diversity in your district?
I don't think there's a ton. I think it's Pasco County is becoming a little bit more racially diverse, but it's not noticeable. The economic is much, much noticeable. You can drive along 54 and start where I start, and basically you can see the change in neighborhoods. You can see the beautiful New Ballantree neighborhood. You can see, the gorgeousness of Wesley Chapel, and then you go, oh, here we are. And it's
because unfortunately the kind of things that I've paid attention to coming out of Pasco, and the things that I've heard about where like a year ago there were some kids at a high school who dressed up as Ku Klux Klan members and thought that was okay, and I don't know what kind of punitive things that they've gotten, and I've heard a few other things that made me wonder about the racial sensitivity on the Pasco County School Board as well.
Pasco, the school board has some work to do, that's for sure. The sheriff's office has some work to do as well. We're hearing, I actually came here, there was a rally happening in front of the sheriff's office this afternoon because a gentleman named, I'm going to screw this up, Andre Rocks, a member of the Wu-Tang Clan, was arrested for not showing his ID while his father was pulled over on a traffic stop. So there's issues with the whole county and our country is going through this of how do we treat other people just because they don't look like us. I'm privileged to be a white cis female, and I see people every day who are different than me that are treated like crap, and it's up to us to determine how we're going to act.
So you definitely feel like you'd be a strong advocate for equality, regardless of whether it's racial, economic, gendered, any of the terms we use to divide ourselves. You're a strong advocate for inclusion. And
I am, and I will be the first to say I don't know everything. I don't.
Sure.
I'm learning.
Right.
As I think we all should be. And I have people smarter than me around me that can help me. I'm like, I think this is what I want to say, but let me sound this off to you. And does this sound horrible? Am I a horrible person for thinking this? Or is my thoughts on track? And there's a better way to say it so as to not.
So we call that being reflective.
Yes. Yeah.
So while we're talking about this, because it kind of segues into where I want to kind of land, is whether it's based on economic factors or based on racial divides, there is an obvious problem that we have where there's a school to prison pipeline. And I was speaking to a legislative candidate, and I didn't even realize that she said a lot of times that they base the number of prisons and how we're going to staff them directly to like third grade testing reading scores. So what are your thoughts specifically on the school to prison pipeline, if you've had any of those in your platform?
I haven't talked about it much. Working with the foster children community,
right?
They have a higher likelihood of being in prison by the time they're 20. They age out at 18. They have almost literally nothing,
right?
And they've got to figure out life. So I think we need to build programs for foster children to help with that transition. But I also believe that we need to work harder on career and vocational, because how many students do we have dropping out that go, college isn't for me, so there's nothing else. And, college isn't for me, so I'm going to go with my cousin over here and we're going to go do whatever illegal activity they do. And I get caught and I'm in jail. Because college isn't for me, and I've never tested well. I personally have never tested well. You can ask my professors in college. You can ask my high school teachers, my 7th grade reading teacher. I can pull her up on Facebook. She'll tell you right now. I've never tested well. But I still was able to write papers. I was able to get the concepts, and if I could talk about it, I could pass a test, no problem. It's multiple choice and filling out. That didn't go well for me. So you have people like me that are like, I don't test well. I don't necessarily grade well, but I know it. You have people that don't test well, don't grade well, don't know it, but they can fix a car like you've never seen. But we haven't given them that opportunity to grow in their gifts.
So creating more opportunities is key.
Yeah, creating the vocational opportunities, working with junior achievement in our elementary schools to learn. I remember in 5th grade, I learned how to make a ballpoint pen. Having those different types of things that we can teach our students that are valuable.
How about the private prison lobbyists? Do you think that you'd come into contact with them as a school board member? And would you be committed to making sure that you don't take any funding and standing up to the private prison lobby?
I will not take any funding from private prison lobby. My dad was a CO in Pennsylvania in the 80s.
Correctional officer?
Yes, correctional officer. And I've heard stories that I assume happen that are 10 times worse. And not saying that he was, a saint, and not saying that he was the devil, but he, there were things that, you have to protect yourself. And he just, it's worse now. And we know it's worse now. We've seen pictures, we've seen videos that have been taken in our prisons that, you have Sheriff Joe out in Arizona. That's a nightmare.
Who was pardoned.
Pardoned
by our president.
So, no, I won't. Private prisons really aggravate me. But in my campaign, I've not raised a lot of money. People, I'm considered the underdog. I'm okay with that. I've taken funds from a business owner who has given it to me privately, but I have not received any funds from businesses. Currently, I don't see any stepping up, but
no one's knocking down your doors.
Nobody's knocking down my doors. But I have educators that are behind me. I have families that, can't give me a donation, but they make phone calls. I have, or are putting signs up in their yard.
Right.
I'm doing this purely people that I've met, people that believe in what I have to say.
So you're running a real grassroots campaign.
I am. I haven't taken money from contractors.
Thank you.
That want to build our schools and maybe want that nod on that contract.
Absolutely.
I haven't taken money from real estate agents, which the incumbent is a real estate agent. So I have questions about zoning and what her business may have been able to do after zoning happened.
sounds like a conflict of interest to me, but what do I know?
What do I know?
So let me jump to a few other topics really quickly, just to get your feedback on that. One of the things that obviously is a huge controversial topic is gun violence in our schools, the Marshall Program, arming teachers and support staff. What are your thoughts on school safety and gun violence in schools?
Well, let me start this with when I was in college, I had an opportunity to become an emergency medical technician, an EMT. Through that, I did FEMA training courses and have a handful of certificates from that. In high school, I was able to we had a day where Lancaster County, Pennsylvania chose my high school because it was the largest to run an exercise, an active shooter drill, where they had someone come in who was a shooter. It was on a Sunday afternoon, so that parents had to sign a ton of paperwork to let us play, basically. And we ran around the school. I was stuck in the cafeteria. I learned about areas of the kitchen that I never wanted to know, and places to hide if it were to happen at my school. It was a very valuable training exercise. It happened, I believe, in 2002 or 2003. October of 2006, our county made national headlines. We had the Nickel Mines Amish school shooting. I spoke to some people as an EMT a few years later that responded to nickel mines. They told me that they had been involved a few years prior at an active shooter situation at Penn Manor High School, which was my high school. I was also there. Obviously didn't know them at that point. And they said it stunk having to work the nickel mines incident, but they were able to see their training come into play. I believe Pasco County needs something similar. And because it's such a large county, maybe we need to do two simultaneously. That would help prepare us for if something would happen. We don't want a hurricane to come, but that doesn't mean we don't have a box in the closet ready to go. We need to prepare. We need to get guns under control. One of the congressional candidates for CD 12, Congressional District 12, has an idea of the government having right of first sale or right of first refusal. I don't remember. But essentially, if I walk into a pawn shop or a gun shop and want to sell my gun, the gun shop owner says, I'll give you $500 for it. The government has the right to come in and say, you know what, we'll give you $600 for that gun. Nobody's right to bear arms is being taken away, but we're getting guns off the street. It's essentially a buyback program, and that would help get guns out of our schools. Building our mental health system in our schools and training our teachers, not that they need one more thing to be trained on, but training our teachers to say, you know, Johnny's not doing so hot today. And it's past, like, I think he's mad that his girlfriend dumped him or, you know, he woke up on the wrong side of the bed. Something's not right. And being able to immediately refer that student to a mental health counselor on campus. I think those are essential. And I'm glad they're part of our new laws that were passed, but again, unfunded mandates. We need the money for them.
Would you agree with arming teachers in school?
No. Pasco County, we were basically given 3 options. We have the guardianship program where volunteers come in.
Right.
No. We have school resource officers, which we can't, the sheriff's deputies or the city police departments come in and are carrying in our schools and continuing to be the SRO, school resource officers. We couldn't afford it for all of our elementary schools. And the third option was arming teachers. And that made no sense to anybody. I'm sorry. My math teacher would not have been a good person to have a gun on them.
You're the second candidate who's told a story like that today.
Yeah. Actually, it was probably more my computer teacher in middle school. But anyway, that's a whole other rabbit trail. But they wouldn't necessarily be the best person. Now, my history teacher, okay, I wouldn't mind him having a gun. But hey, no. It's either everybody's allowed to or nobody. And I'd prefer the nobody. So what Pasco County did was they created a fourth option. And it was approved, I'm assuming, by the state. I didn't hear how that approval went, but I'm sure it was okay. They hired people, and they have a school security officer. It's not a sheriff's deputy. It's not a police department, but it's also not a volunteer. It's somebody that the school district is completely liable for. They are a paid employee, and they went through training with the sheriff's office. They went through shooting training. To be a school safety officer, they required that they had at least an 85% on the marksmanship test. There were a few that had 100. To also put into comparison, to be a sheriff, you only have to have an 80%. So while I still don't like the idea of someone being armed in our school that is not a sheriff's deputy, this person is purely responsible for maintaining the safety of the school.
Do they do any kind of mental background training?
They did. Before they even were accepted, they had a psychological evaluation.
All right. So let's quickly cover, I know that you had mentioned LGBTA in some of your earlier conversations. And as I mentioned on our earlier show, we just recently had a school board candidate come out and talk about, again, bring up, different bathrooms for different genders. And we start to see the attack on the LGBTA community starting even as early in elementary school, and we start designating bathrooms. So how committed are you to specifically protecting that portion of our population and making sure that we're advocating for those students who identify at even the earliest ages?
I believe currently in Pasco schools, if you don't identify as male or female, or you identify as the different gender that was assigned to you at birth, you are to use the nurse's bathroom. That's a step in the right direction. I believe with every new build and any renovations that we do, we need to assign a single-use bathroom, single-person bathrooms throughout the buildings on our campuses, because students need to have a place where they can feel safe. If they choose to use, this is an area I'm growing in. I grew up in a very conservative church in elementary and middle school, and they were very anti-LGBT. So I'm still learning and growing and building. And I don't know all the proper vocabulary, so I apologize if I get this part wrong.
If a student wanted to use a bathroom that was not the bathroom that was assigned to their specific gender when they were born,
they have the right to do so. I fully believe that. I just want an option where they can be completely safe. And unfortunately, not everyone is growing as I'm hoping that I am, in their beliefs that everybody should be able to use whatever bathroom they want. They should be able to sign up for any sport that they want, that corresponds with the gender they are.
So that brings me to kind of our last question, which wasn't something that I originally was going to talk about, but I heard you talk about some of your history, and it sounded like you had a religious background, and then you mentioned it again just now. So tell me a little bit, and this will be our last question because I want to wrap it up, and then you can tell me anything that you want to add. But tell me a little bit about the separation between church and state in education.
So the separation in education, the separation of church and state is not a law. It was letters written that suggested it could be or should be. I agree. And I believe it was more so the government would stay out of the church than the church out of the government. But I think if we're going to separate one, we need to separate it all. People that I know and love dearly are like, separation of church and state. They shouldn't, they shouldn't be getting into our church and doing this. And it's like, okay, then pay taxes, like everybody else.
How about more specifically, with religion in schools?
Religion in schools. I think if we have clubs in our schools, which we do, we should be able to have a faith-based club, a Christian-based club. But so should everybody else. If we're going to have a Christian-based club, we should be able to have a Wiccan. If, or Hindu or any religion that wants their own club, absolutely. Or we can all meld together and do a faith-based club. But I think other than that, a student-led club, there should be no need for it in schools. If we're going to talk about, if somebody feels that they want to learn about creationism, that's fine. That's my personal belief. Well, sort of. I believe evolution happened creation happened after evolution. Anyway, kind of a meld. But I think creation could be taught in a, I'm blanking on the name, like a world cultures or sociology type
under
class.
a larger umbrella.
Under a larger umbrella, talking about, I remember I had a class in college that talked about 6 or 7 different types of creationism. And then we had to come up with a short story melding like 4 of them together.
So let's say the state legislative wanted to push "In God We Trust" to be at the beginning of our schools or in our schools.
They did.
And how do you feel about that?
I was not pleased. There is a state representative out of Tampa who voted for it, and I yelled at him. And their response was, well, it's already on our flag. I didn't see what the problem was. Well, it shouldn't be on our flag, and now we have to pay to have it put in our schools. And I have this background like that. Everybody's like, well, why are you arguing against it? Well, because it's not to be there. If a club wants to put it up, that's one thing and they get permission. But now you're forcing schools to pay for this to be put in. An atheist group came up and said, yeah, we'll do it. So you guys don't have to spend any more money on this. We'll pay for them to go. I forget which district or if it was for the whole state, but it's a silly law that we're going to fight to repeal. But in the meantime, we're not wasting any money. You're not going to waste any more of our money to put it in.
Interesting. I didn't know that. All right. Well, that kind of wraps up the questions that I have. Is there anything else that we haven't really talked about that might be in your platform or something that you want to address and let our listeners know about?
My main platform is the 3 R's for Pasco schools. It's not reading, writing, and arithmetic.
Okay.
It's responsible building and growth, readiness for the future, and a robust comprehensive curriculum. I believe we need solar panels when we build. First off, we're spending, I just looked at the number yesterday, I want to say about $11 million a year to power our schools, which when you look at how many schools we have and how big they are, doesn't seem like a ton, but it's a lot.
Sure.
And when we can add solar panels to possibly to our existing buildings, but definitely in any of our future builds, and we can use the power to lower our costs during the school year and then sell any additional power during our summer months.
Right.
We'd have money for raises. We'd have money for science experiments. We'd have money for field trips. We could build the best STEAM programs in the country.
Right.
If we use solar panels and solar power. So that's the responsible building and growth. I believe because of that, I was endorsed by the Democratic Environmental Caucus of Florida. I've been talking about that for the last 13 months.
Oh.
And then readiness for the future and robust comprehensive curriculum kind of go hand in hand. With the robust comprehensive curriculum, I want to work with our current teachers, our retired teachers, and recent graduates to see what they need. What do they need for college? What do they need for career that they're not getting? Or what can we build on that they were getting a smidge of? And what's useless? What's pointless to them? It's like when I was in school, I learned how to balance a checkbook. I don't balance a checkbook anymore. I look at my phone and I go, yep, I did that. I did that. I did that. I did that. What is that? Oh yeah, I did that. I can pull it up instantly.
Right.
There's not much of a need for that. So if we're still teaching something that's outdated, why? And our students can probably tell us a little bit better.
You want to help use them to streamline our curriculum to be more effective.
Yep.
Awesome.
And then readiness for the future is again that career and technology piece that I feel is missing. Or for maybe our older listeners like myself, I'm not that old, but we called it VOTEC, vocational training.
Right.
So we need to build on those and get everybody ready, because Pasco needs industry to come in. Mm-hmm. We've got people pouring out of our county every day to go to work. And I think it's because our education is flailing. We're kind of middle of the pack in the state of Florida, in the standings. Our teachers aren't paid well, so they're not staying in Pasco to teach. And then our infrastructure and our public transportation could use a boost, but there are county commissioners that can talk to you about candidates that can talk to you about that.
I might know one.
Probably.
Her name might be Kelly Smith.
She is fabulous.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Tell me a little bit about your election. So when can people, I assume that, like you said, early voting ballots, vote by mail, have already been released. So some people are choosing now. So you'll be on the August 28th ballot.
Yep, I will be on the August 28th ballot.
And there'll be a runoff if one candidate doesn't secure over 50%?
Yep, it's 50% plus one vote. Okay. So I'm really hoping, because I am the only D, even though there's no Democrat designation on the ballot, but it's me. And I'm hoping to get that 50%.
Hoping that blue wave rolls you right in.
Come on, bring me in, bring me home, because I need a nap. And
me too.
But if not, we're looking forward to November, and we've got a good ground game set up for starting August 29th.
All right. If people want to get involved, what's the best way to get involved in your campaign?
You can go on Facebook, Meghan Hamer for Pasco County School Board. You can go to Hamer for Pasco Schools 3.
Is that what the number for?
Yeah,
or the
so it's www.hamer number 4 Pasco Schools 3
because of your district.
.com. Yeah, because of my district. So
awesome. And then people can contact you if they want to. Are you looking for phone banks, canvassing?
Phone bank, canvas.
Do you have any upcoming events that people might want to know about?
Not currently. We have sign waving, and those are on the Facebook. Okay. They're going to be launched on the Facebook this week.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming out here, for contacting me, getting on my radar, and letting Pasco voters know what you're standing for, and so that they know what they're voting for on the ballot. To all of our listeners, thank you so much for listening. As always, you can email me with any questions or concerns. My email is jvaughn, V as in Victor, AUGHN, the number 30 @gmail.com. Please like our Facebook. Just search for Reclaiming My Mind so you know when new podcasts have been released. And also show your friends our website if they want to go ahead and take a listen at reclaimingmymind.org. Thank you again, Megan.
Thanks.
And listeners, have a great afternoon.